Okay. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this evening's conversation, Memory Work as Care Work, Black Archives and Archival Practices. My name is Kristen Owens. I am a curator and librarian with interests in Black visual and material culture, and I'm so honored to be the guest organizer of tonight's program for Bard Graduate Center. I'd like to start this program by acknowledging the land we are hosting this event from. I say this acknowledgement aware that these kinds of statements can be misused as stand-ins for actual decolonization work, which is something for us to bear in mind as we go forward in our ongoing commitment to accountability, reparation, and equity. Many cities and institutions in America were founded on the exclusion, harm, and erasures of many Indigenous peoples, including those on whose land, Manhattan, from which we are hosting this event. The land of the 5 boroughs that make up New York City is the unceded territory of the Lenape, Merrick, Canarsie, Matinecock, and Rockaway nations. Despite systemic erasures, these lands persist as intertribal trade lands under the stewardship of many nations and over 115,000 intertribal Native American, First Nations, and Indigenous peoples who currently call New York City home. If you'd like to learn more about the land you are on, you can click the link that we posted in the chat shortly. In addition, I would like to acknowledge those whose ancestors did not arrive on these lands of their own free will and whose tremendous cultural, economic, and technological contributions continue to provide the foundation for our lives. For tonight's lovely speakers, I'm so excited to introduce our moderator, Zakiya Collier, a Brooklyn-based Black queer archivist and memory worker, Stephen G. Fullwood, an archivist, writer, documentarian, and co-founder of the Nomadic Archivist Project, and Amy Sall, a Senegalese American cultural entrepreneur and founder and editor-in-chief of SUNU, Journal of African Affairs, Critical Thought, and Aesthetics. You can find out more about our speakers through the links to their websites, which will also be provided in the chat shortly. And before I hand over the program to tonight's moderator, Zakiya, I'd also like to note that closed captioning can be enabled by using the CC button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the Zoom Q&A function, and Zakiya will address them at the end. Again, thank you so much for joining us for tonight's conversation. And now I'm going to pass it on to our moderator, Zakiya.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everyone who has helped to put this event together. And thank you for joining us on an unusually warm day in April if you're in New York. And so hopefully there's still a little bit of sun left after this so you can get a little warmth for today. So thank you for coming to spend time with us in light of that. So I am so delighted to be here and was so grateful when I received the invitation from Kristen to discuss 2 of my favorite topics, which are archiving memory work and care and how it's implemented in that work. And I am delighted to be joined by 2 wonderful folks, Amy Sall and Stephen G. Fullwood. And so I'm a moderator, that's my title, but my methodology is collectivity. So, I like to just be in conversation and just, we here. So I'll ask questions. You can ask questions to me. We can ask questions to each other. And audience members, please feel free to drop questions into the chat. And as Kristen said, we will get to those at the end. Sorry, not the chat. Let me correct that, in the Q&A function. And that will make it easier for me to get to them at the end of the program. So welcome, Stephen and Amy. So to get started, I would love for you all to introduce yourselves and your work, your definition of care work, and in your definition of care work, just really how care shows up in your work. as you understand it and see it and do it. Yeah. So
Amy?
whoever wants to start.
Amy.
Okay, I'll start. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be part of this amazing program. I'm very happy to have been invited and to be in conversation with Zakiya and Stephen. So Kristen already made a lovely introduction, but I'll just reiterate. My name is Amy Sall. I am the founder and editor of SUNY Journal of African Affairs, Critical Thought and Aesthetics. It was an initiative, or it is an initiative that I started while I was in graduate school during my final semester in 2015. And that came about through the need and the want to be in communion and conversation with people like myself who were interested in African artifacts, films, photographs, artwork, and from the diaspora as well. So it's a Pan-African global platform that really celebrates African and Afro-diasporic culture, history. I'm also an adjunct professor at the New School University, where I've taught and conceived 2 courses, one called The African Gaze, Post-Colonial Visual Culture of Africa and the Social Imagination. It's a long title. I love long titles. But The African Gaze for short, and the other one is called Third Cinema and the Counter Narratives. And that I started teaching at the New School in 2016 and recently sort of took a break in 2020. And it was during that time that I started my own private collection in 2018 called the Sall collection, which I'll talk about later. And that really sort of grounded me in this archival work, particularly archiving with care and with intention. And I think that's me in a nutshell. So I'm happy to be here, and I'll pass it over to Stephen.
Thank you, Amy. I was like, I want to take your classes. So like, hurry up and go back.
More than welcome.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Sydney. And thank you, my beloved Zakiya, my sister, who I adore, who I'm always inspired by. I'm Stephen G. Fullwood. I am the co-founder of the Nomadic Archivist Project. We work with people of African descent to consider what they would like to do with their archives. So it could be as simple as preserving grandma's picture to archiving this organization that was founded in the 1950s. What we hope to do and what we've been doing for the past 3 to 4 years has been to offer scholarship for folks who are in school right now, becoming archivists, who would like to go to SAA and to get them a membership, as well as to fund archival initiatives. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on as well. Miranda Mims and I have been friends for about over a decade, and Miranda Mims is the director of archives at the University of Rochester. And if you want anything organized, she will throw it up in the air and it'll come down organized. Better than you thought. And she's just that dynamic and amazing. And the way that, and I became interested in archives, excuse the noise, sorry about this. I became interested in archives because I'm interested in family history, I'm interested in history, I'm interested in Black history, I'm interested in Afro-diasporic histories, I'm interested in African histories, I'm interested in queer histories, Black feminist histories. All of that goes there. And so one of the ways that I've been privileged, I've been really honored to work at the Schomburg for about 19 years, 3 months and 24 days. I was an archivist and a curator there. I had the best possible experience, but I left to become a filmmaker to learn how to do this work independently. And right now I work with Marking Time, which is Nicole Fleetwood's award-winning book that focuses on art of the incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, as well as artists whose work exposed the carceral state for what it is. And we are opening up, as a matter of fact, next week, April 21st, in Cincinnati, Ohio, at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Very, very honored to be working with her because I only want to do work that I care about. And for the most part, most of my life has been that. And the way that care shows up in my work is I'm always interested. I think when I was younger, work was something you had to do to survive. And the way that care shows up in my work is that it's always about community, it's always about love, and it's always about responsibility. So if you have these gifts, if you have this inclination, it's really up to you to help see how you can help build, sustain, and develop community. And so that's how care shows up in my work. as well as just being interested in the work and how we understand each other and communicate through documentation, and how amazing that is, because you're having these conversations, you know, throughout time with the work, with the people who created, with the organizations. And so I'll stop there, but care shows up in my work in a number of ways, but it's definitely responsibility, love, and community. Those are the three ways.
No, that's right. You just gave us a sermon in your first response. You better come with it, Stephen. So it's so wonderful to just, you know, hear about the work that you are doing now, and the things that you care about. And, you know, I said we were going to have a conversation, so I guess I should answer the question too, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So
that right there.
And make it make sense, you know, while we're all here in this space together. So I am an archivist, a memory worker. I be writing sometimes. Right, Stephen? I write sometimes. I am a community member, lover of Black folks, and that is why I'm an archivist, because I think I came to this profession knowing that the beauty that I see in my people every day wasn't always reflected in history books and in archival institutions, in archival documents, and wanting to do something about that. It was just so moved to be like, okay, I'm gonna go get a whole other degree just so I can like do this work. And, you know, since then have sort of worked at the Schomburg Center as a digital archivist, doing web archiving, at Weeksville Heritage Center as a project archivist, oral history intern, anything that Weeksville needs me to be. What else I've been doing? Working with the Maryland Nance Archive. I see Maryland is here in the house. So consulting with the Maryland. Maryland. Hey, Maryland. And for Weeksville, hey, Zen. Hey, Steph. Okay. Everybody's here. Family's here. You know, working with the Maryland Nance. And so I feel so called and compelled to working, like you said, Stephen, with things that I care about, which are Black people. And so, you know, that just keeps me moving. And that's as plain as I can make it. I care about Black people and making our lives more livable, both in the archive and in our, like, you know, physical lives for those of us that are still here on Earth. So, yeah, I think I would love to hear a little bit more about how you all actually came to the work and started getting involved with it. Take us way back into time, and let us know how you know, ended up here before us today.
Okay, maybe I never intended to, well, I guess my archival practice sort of takes on many different forms. One form was, and I guess this can be contested and argued, like if this is a form of archiving, but I was actively and still am posting a lot of archival images on Instagram. And that's sort of like how I started getting deeper into the archive. And if I really think about how I engaged with the archive and an archival practice, I think I would take it back to in grad school. I was studying human rights. I had a regional focus on sub-Saharan Africa. And so I really looked to old films and old photographs to sort of help me contextualize the very dense sort of human rights framework and concepts that I was learning about. So for example, if I was learning about sort of like youth unemployment issues or sort of things that related to youth rights, I would go to an Ousmane Sembène film from Senegal and sort of look at the themes that he presented in his films. He talked a lot about the youth in Senegal, the sort of capitalistic society that spurred many of the issues that capitalism spurs. And so that sort of helped me ground and understand some of the core concepts that I was dealing with. And that led me to other forms of archives and databases with regard to photography. And I started to share that on social media, like share some things that I would find, share some things that were of interest to me. And then I sort of found that there was a community of people who were interested in this particular material, old film, vintage and vernacular photographs, studio photographs. And so it sort of began there, but I never had the intention of sort of setting up a collection or setting up an archive until I started teaching about the very material that I was interested in, African film and African photography at the New School. And that came about, starting my collection came about through observing the fact that every time I came across, let's say, an image by Malik Sidibé from Mali, or any sort of vernacular photo, from the 1950s, 1960s, when I traced the genealogy, when I traced the provenance, it was always in some collection held by some private white institution or some non-Black private collector. And it really angered me that there weren't many collectors or places that were sort of being governed or taken care of by people who looked like us, people who looked like the people, the subjects, the sitters in the photographs. And that led me to sort of go on this mission, so to speak, to sort of buy back the archive, because I was like, there needs to be, more homes, more people who look like us who are taking care of this sort of material. It can't just be in the museums. It can't just be in the private collection somewhere in France or Switzerland. It needs to be in the homes of people who look like the subjects in this material. And so I started slowly but surely collecting photographs, collecting things that were related to my interests, like old film posters, printed matter. And so that's sort of how the Sall collection was born. And then maybe at some point I can, share some of the material, but maybe once we go deeper in conversation. So yeah, slowly but surely started collecting items and artifacts that were related to my interests, specifically African photographs, African cinema, old journals, old newspapers. And yeah, it's been steadily growing since 2018. I've sharpened my eye. I've learned so much more about an archival practice and like really trying to be a student of archiving. I'm not like you guys, not a professional, not like a professional archivist, but just coming to it from just pure love, pure interest, like you guys have been saying, just pure care and intention, and knowing that I'm not just dealing with tactile objects, I'm dealing with history, I'm dealing with people's lives and stories. Many of the subjects, many of the sitters in these photographs, for example, are unnamed, and I'm having to just still be very respectful of these people because they're still people with stories, whether or not they are named on the back of a photograph or whatever. And so just keeping intention in the forefront and understanding that before anything, I'm dealing with stories, lives, histories that I'm very much connected to. So that's sort of how my introduction and I guess the deepening of my archival work sort of began and developed. So it was sort of like social media, grad school, and then as I entered the academic space on a different way, it was kind of more intentional and more like, okay, let's set something up. Let's set up an actual collection that really takes into consideration care, intention, and yeah.
Yes, you said the words, intention. That is one of my favorite words to use, especially in regards to this work, because you got to pay attention. Like, it's not nothing to play with. Black life is not anything to play with. Yeah. Stephen, you wanna talk to us about how you got into this work?
Yeah, I want to comment with on Amy saying that people who look like us when we're running these institutions, and I have had the best experience because the only institutions I worked in were run by Black people. And sometimes with the Schomburg Center, it was diasporic Black people. It was a variety of Black people. In fact, the Schomburg Center was founded by an Afro-Puerto Rican man, so Arthur Schomburg. And so I came to it, I'll be as succinct as possible, through family. I wanted to know more about our family history. My father's from Louisiana, my mother's from Toledo, Ohio. My father migrated, I think maybe 3 or 4 days after he graduated from high school to Toledo, but he was making his way across the Midwest to the West to go live with family in California. But he met my mother, they got married, had 5 kids, I'm number 3. And I've always been interested in trying to figure out where people come from. So I want to know where my dad came from. He had a very thick Southern accent that he maintains today, even though he spent more time out of that state than he has in his adopted home. And my mother passed away in 97, and they were just 2 different people. Like, they would cook differently, they spoke differently. Eventually they got divorced because they were that different. And there's a picture of my mom in the back there. This is the woman he met. She was a senior in high school. She graduated. It was 2 years after that he met her and they got married. He had never seen this picture. I found this picture online at ancestry.com, and they have been digitizing yearbooks. So it brought me a lot of joy to bring him this picture. And he cried when he saw it. He was like, because he's reminiscing and thinking about it. Genealogy helps me place history in its proper context. Right. So history as a kid, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. It was a lot of dates. It was a lot of George Washington and, virtually nothing from Africa, except that we were enslaved and that, Lincoln freed the enslaved people. So when I started doing research in history, everything started to make more sense to me when I could see my family migrate across the US or overseas, or connect with people in Jamaica, because there are apparently a lot of Fullwoods there when I were just trying to figure out how we might be related. I like those conversations. They make a lot of sense to me. Earlier when I said I thought that work was something that you need to do to survive, that's very capitalist realism. It's very, if you have the ability to do what you want to do for a living, it's an amazing thing. And so I became a children's librarian, even though I went to school for English and broadcasting. I just couldn't see myself working for a television station because they were interested in chasing news. They weren't interested in decent stories. I grew up in a racist town, still racist. They had a race riot in 2006. I was like, a race riot in 2006? Good Lord. Anyhow, I left to go to school at Clark Atlanta University and decided I wanted to get my MLS, my Master's in Library and Information Science, and decided that I wanted to open up a place like the Schomburg Center. So I found my way to the Schomburg Center. I found the director, gave him my resume at a conference. And 2 months later, the woman who hired me, Diana LeChatinier, who's the most amazing curator you'll ever have, had the best possible experience. They like dirt bikes on my street. They like dirt bikes on my street. I live in Harlem, they like dirt bikes on my street. And so Diana hired me shortly after I got out of grad school, December 97. I was working at the Schomburg in February 98 as an archivist in the Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Division. And I knew a little bit about archives because I helped process a collection in graduate school for the College Language Association papers at the Barbara Woodruff Library. And it was like, a nosy person like me wants to know letters that aren't written to me that I'm reading. They ain't even gotta be interesting letters. I'm just like, these are the things that this is that intimacy that helps us understand why people do what they do, So I had the amazing experience of processing the Lorraine Hansberry papers, the James Baldwin papers, the Alice Childress papers, and a number of other collections. And so I had a very good experience when it comes to archives and the value and the understanding that when Black people are archiving themselves, they're thinking, 200, 300 years ahead. They're thinking very clearly of who they want to talk to and why. And so working at the Schomburg Center, I will say this, it was one of the best experiences of my life. I'm still connected to it. I still do work there from time to time. But archives found me, I think, because it understood that I was interested, and then I got trained up. But I got trained up, not just at Clark, I got trained up by Black people, by a Black Cuban woman, Diana Lachatinier, and my colleagues who were just the most amazing people on earth. So we understood that the work we were doing was counter-narrative. We understood that it was the work that a lot of people, Black Lives Matter, we understood that a long time ago. We understood that there's a continuum when it comes to Black resistance, Black struggle. I like saying Black people did everything. You just found out. How come Black people can't where they did that? Here's the evidence. And so that's why I think it's so important for us to be in these institutions, to do the work that we do, because we interrupt that narrative. But I'm gonna go Toni Morrison on it. I'm not particularly interested in talking to white people about Black pathology or anything else. We already know what we did. What we need to do is to continue talking to ourselves and sharing this information to show that this work and these towns that were built and all these different kinds of things that have happened that we've done, here's the evidence. And also we need to remind people that they are history makers in themselves, not in any kind of influencer, look at me, I'm trying to sell you something kind of way. I'm talking about you have a responsibility to those coming up behind you and to those who were before you. So what are you gonna do with that? So archives for me help me become a lot more grounded in this world.
Yes, y'all. And it don't stop, okay? I don't know why hip hop is just in my spirit this evening, but it's here, so here we are. But yeah, I mean, I think first I want to rewind back to something that Amy said, and you know, you were like, I'm not sure if this is archivic, but I post these pictures on social media, and I just want to affirm you and let you know that you are doing the work, okay? You don't need to be in debt to do the work. Let me just let you know.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
From this side of the debt, okay? You don't need to be over it.
And you know, it just speaks to the many forms of archiving and just like with technology, and you know, and that's the beauty of the archive. It's not, you know, this like stagnant thing, it's ever evolving. But I think that what keeps it important is just the notion of, again, intention and care, knowing that we're dealing with, as Stephen mentioned, people's histories. Like this is our legacy. Legacy is important. That's another word that I love to talk about. I'm like really thinking about legacy a lot. And what you said, Stephen, really made me think about recent conversations that I've been having. Like we really do think like 200 years far into the future. Like what are we, how are we taking care? How can we be the best custodians over this material so that those in the future can have accessibility and feel connected to the material in the ways that we feel connected to it? Like that connection is transportable, whether it's on social media, whether it's in a physical archive. Just having that idea of legacy and intention is so important. And sorry, Zakiya, I know I think I'm sort of like cutting you off, but there was like one other thing when you were affirming the digital archiving that I was doing on social media. I think one thing that I'm really one thing that I like hold myself to is to make sure that I include as much of the metadata, as much pertinent information as possible, because that's where archiving on social media can become a slippery slope. When it's just the image, when it's just the film, when it's just the letter or the book or whatever, and there's no context, there's no information, people are left in the dark. And not only are people left in the dark about the information, but it's a total disservice and disrespect to the lives who are involved in that material. And so I always make sure that I put as much of the metadata and pertinent information so that I'm honoring the work and the people, but also those who take interest in that particular material can then do their own further research and digging and arrive to the archives in their own way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you talking about you don't know. Come on now.
I'm not like y'all. You all trained up, as Stephen said.
Listen,
trained up.
if you say the word metadata just in your everyday life, just randomly throwing out the word metadata, you good. I promise you.
I'm approaching it from a very autodidactic perspective, and it's such a humbling thing. I mean, I wish I had access to like the formal you know, training of archiving, but I'm really just learning on my own, especially like from folks like you who are encouraging me. And, you know, it's a lovely thing.
I mean, like Stephen said, like this work, you know, is really about being in conversation with each other about our histories, about our futures. And I think, you know, with social media, that's just such a place to do that, right? That's where people are having conversations. And like you mentioned, can take it, you know, can come across it in whatever context they come across it, but then they can take it, you know, so far to like researching their own families. Maybe that is their family, you know, like deciding to do this work to help other people or people in their communities, or maybe to get the language for what they've already been doing. You know, like that's sort of that's how I kind of came to the profession myself, of like, once I learned the term archive and like understood the practice of it, I'm like, oh, that's what I've been doing my whole life. I thought I was just like weird because I bring everything home, and I'm like, ooh, this flyer from this event I went to when I was like 8, I have it at, you know, like I have it, you know. And so it's just like, you know, I'm the kid who like way before, you know, we had like iPhones, and like I would write down all the songs that I wanted to like one day, like I want to put on a CD. I had the notebook where like 2,000 songs are in that notebook that I was like, oh, I heard this song on the radio. I got to remember to like add that and like make a, like burn a CD. And so, but I like somehow understood the value of like writing things down and keeping them, and like the agendas they would give us at school. I'm like, I want to know what homework I had 2 years ago. Why I want to know that? I don't know. You know, like I just wanted to understand the context of my own life. And like when I am lost on the journey, I'm like, oh, let me redirect and be like, girl, this has always, you know, been you. Like, if you ever confused, go look at that old, you know, notebook, and like you've processed this already, but you just forgot a little bit. And so, and like you always say, Stephen, you know, benefit from your own experiences, you know. I think I just kind of had that in me to be like, I want to benefit from the, how you say it, Stephen? You here? Tell me.
I'm on some other point I wanted to make. I'm gonna make that point and come back to this, which is you come from an archivist. You come from, your mother was archiving you and your brother's work. She was archiving other people's experiences with her camera. So like, so the reason why I know all this is because Zakiya, I'm co-editing an anthology called The Evidence, Black Archivists Holding Memory. And Zakiya submitted a conversation between her and her mother. And I read it the other day, actually read it a couple of times, to grasp what the enormity of it, but also to figure out how best to serve as an editor for the piece. And it's great. I like the way she's bringing her mother slowly into this conversation about what she's done. And her mother's like, oh yeah, I did this. And you can see the archivist in Zakiya and her mother I'm just doing this. And it makes me, it's a conversation I've witnessed rather over and over again about Black folks doing stuff that didn't put no name to nothing. They just knew that they wanted to see what you look like when you were 2 years old. So she took that picture. She had that in her mind. And then you get Zakiya coming home going with the flyer and whatnot, and so what I said earlier, that you deserve the benefit of your own story. And your story is so complex and it's solely yours. And what I think is interesting is that our obsession with celebrities or whomever, someone with a name in the street, you are as interesting, if not more interesting, you know, based on where you came from, the kinds of experiences that you have, but it's all about how you value it. And I think archives can help remind you not of what you just did in the kindergarten, but when you're able to tell your story, I think you better understand other people's stories. I think you're a more responsible person. No one asks anybody in America, and as far as I know in any other country, to grow up. how do you mature? How do you grow up? Well, I think you have to know your story. I think that's part of becoming a responsible person that's not led around by the nose by this political ideology or this religious idea. It's like you're in this, and being responsible for yourself means you have to grow up. You have to. And how do you grow up? If you don't know your story, how are you going to grow up? You know, so
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, when I learned about the profession, one of the first things I thought about, and like the first couple of times that I went into an archive, and one was in London, the Bishopgate archives, and ran across a copy of Audre Lorde Sammy and like some other materials. And I sat there and read the whole book. Like that, I stayed right there in the archive reading the book and like reading the other materials that were nearby, and just like was crying my eyes out to be like, wow, I wish I had the ability to read someone else's growing up story, you know, when I was growing up, and like to see the mistakes that other people feel they made, without, you know, like we are an oral people, but I think there's also a benefit to seeing, you know, where someone scratches something out, you know, and they're like, or
Right.
seeing a writer and like how many times they're like, no, not this story. No, I don't want to say this. I don't want to say it this way. Or the things that someone kept, you know, from their childhood or from their growing up that meant something to them in that moment. And it tells you so much about who that person is. And I was just like, what would my life have been like if I was affirmed through, you know, an original document in that way growing up? And I wanted to bring that to other people and bring that to children and the people that I feel responsible to coming after me, to be like, yes, I want you to be in the archive, touch stuff. Like, okay, yes, it's precious, but you can touch it. You know how to touch precious things. You're fine. But like what you get out of like seeing those things in a document mean so much more to me than like the risk you pose to the document itself. Because you can take that with you. It lives with you after you've read it, after you've experienced it. And so I'm loving this conversation.
Oh, this is and you know, again, this is why, like, just the emotions I even feel like as you were describing that moment with Zami and the archive, like this is what archiving with care, archiving with intention, and like, archiving with, you know, with an ethical approach means. Like it you feel that connection deeply when you know what's at stake, when you know what you're dealing with, when you know how precious what came before you is, and how precious it is to that person who will receive it long after we're gone. I mean, it's deep stuff. It's healing. It's emotional. It's all the things, and I think that's why I was so sort of frustrated with just the fact that every time I came across images in my field of study and work and research, and I always, whenever I traced the provenance and and like the origin point of the document or the artifact or the photograph, that it was always in some, what I perceived to be some like cold collection, some cold, you know, institution, separate from, or not being held in the hands of people who look like us or who look like the people who were in these photographs. Because I just thought there's no connection, there's no emotion. It's just there just to have, or it's just there to resell in some capitalistic, you know, way, or it's just there to exhibit. It's not there to be cared for and tended to in the way that we're and fellow archivists of color are doing. You know, we're tending to this work, we're tending to these legacies, we're tending to these histories. We're not just keeping them in storage boxes just to keep them in storage boxes. Like they serve a greater purpose. And I just feel so grateful to have found my way to this work and still learning about it, and still feeling those emotions come up every time I come across, you know, a particular photograph or a letter. You know, that I will never forget, I acquired a letter written in, I think it might have been the early 1940s, excuse me, it was around World War II, written by a Senegalese infantryman who was fighting for the French. And he was, I think, awarded a medal, but he had never received it. And so he was like asking for this award that he deserved in the most like beautiful, almost pleading way. It almost made me cry because it was like, here's this man who like just wanted his medal. And I don't know, just things like that. It was like this is real life. This is real stuff. This is our people. Like, this is not just something that can be resold or, you know, to a dealer or just, you know, put in some glass box. Like, this is something that in a way is still living. It's still alive. There's still, it's hard to sort of articulate.
Yeah. What you said made me think that like there's a difference between being held and being kept, because you kept saying holding, right? Like, and when somebody holds you, you know they got you, right? But just being kept is like, okay, we in the house, but you like holding me hostage, but you not holding me, you not tending to me, love me, care for me, you know, like, so I think that is kind of where, you know, when I speak with other Black memory workers, that is what I hear, you know, all the time of like, we are like tending and caring to this document or this object or this image that person may no longer be here, and maybe they are, but like just seeing the humanity and the need to care for it. I mean, we keep saying the word care, but like that's what it is, you know, like, and not just like making sure it has the best preservation standards, like that's part of the work, but like, you know, Amy, you said that these spaces feel cold, and it's like, yeah, you know, Black people don't like the cold, you know, in the physical sense of it, like, but also like the coldness of like, you know, the spaces versus like, yes, we understand preservation standards, all of that good stuff, but like warm them up, you know, like let them
from the heart, yes.
Let people feel them. Let's be, you know, warm. And so all that. But I think, you know, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, I guess, what does that actually, how does care and this tending actually show up in your everyday work? And maybe this is a moment where you all want to share your images and kind of talk about your experiences, but like, what does this actually look like for you?
Stephen, do you want to take that first, or?
Yes, in the spirit of switching things up. And yes, and so I want to share my screen briefly. So very briefly, I just want to highlight something that Zakiya said that I think really shows up in the care work. So recently I did some work for a couple of library systems where they were interested, I think, in the spirit of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. You know, we get excited about something, white institutions want to do things, and then, you know, when the heat is off or the moment is past, they stop. So I was asking my friends who are care workers, archivists, what kinds of advice would you give to archivists and librarians of these kinds of institutions going into Black and brown communities? Zakiya said, community building is 24/7, not just 9 to 5. It's not just about building better, more inclusive collections, but about building a better world, one in which everyone has access to a full life, and better, more inclusive collections will follow. Sustainability of local Black communities must come first, and collection building second. Pretty much everything else is extractive. For me, that I remember actually sharing this slide twice with people, because I was like, I'm not here as an emissary to help you get to Black folks. You've got to do some work. And so, just in short, the care that shows up in my work, for example, would be the In the Life archive at the Schomburg Center. It was formerly known as the Black Gay and Lesbian Archive, and we renamed it in 2013 because the name was much larger, and Black Gay and Lesbian was a placeholder until we found a more suitable name. And although we wanted to be a memorial collection to a number of people who passed, a lot of Black queer icons, it didn't really make a lot of sense because people would conflate, oh, those were the papers are, as opposed to this art, what we would call an artificial collection of books, manuscripts, photographs, AV materials, and a number of other things. I founded in 1999 at the Schomburg Center. and the Schomburg acquired it officially in 2004. We've been building ever since. This collection includes a lot of books you see on here on the table, but a lot of manuscripts as well. And so the care that shows up in the work example I like to give, it's one to like tease you with this to get you to the Schomburg. Yes, you can't read everything, but there's a lot of stuff here, and you can learn about this at the Schomburg Center. But the what I wanted to show you, let's see, this is a bit weird. There we go. So for years, for those of you who know poet Essex Hemphill, those of you who don't, he was a Black gay poet who, for the short time he was here with us, gave us some of the best, beautiful poetry you'll ever read. Essex was born in Washington, D.C., lots of sisters, born to Bishop Warren Hemphill, who passed away, and Manteline Hemphill. They've since divorced. There's a picture of him here in this article here. When Essex Hemphill passed away in November of 1995, it was said that his archive was thrown away by his people, by his parents. And for years, there was this story floating in the ether that they had destroyed his archive. So in short, I reached out to the family in 2011, found his sister on Facebook, Taiwan Hemphill. She was absolutely wonderful. She introduced me to his father. And on Essex's birthday in 2015, the family got together to come to the Schomburg to see what kinds of materials we had on their brother, their son, their uncle, their cousin. And you see his sisters there holding pictures of Essex Hemphill. And according to Taiwan, one of his older sisters, that it was the first time, or not older sister, sorry, a younger sister. It was one of the first times the family had gotten together to celebrate Essex Hemphill's life in that way. And that care was really important to me because I was able to talk to his mother and then also write this article to kind of talk a little bit about the archive itself, but also what was at families. This is the work that we need to do with these institutions. You talk about warming up an institution, bring Black folks in there. Celebrate us. We will celebrate ourselves. We will do what we need to do. We will collect the materials. We will find ways to put it on display, exhibition-wise, but also through programming and other things. And so this was one of my favorite moments at the Schomburg Center because I was able to, along with other staff members, really provide a space for the family to come together and to see their son. I don't think anything ever dies. I think that we just transition, but I think that our words and our ideas and our things and our images live on in our memories, you know. And as long, I think I read a book that said, you stay alive as long as you do until somebody forgets you. And archives have this really important political and also emotional responsibility in collecting these materials. But like everything else in the world, it's political in the sense that who gets to be collected and why. And the stories I could tell you about trying to justify collections to people who have no investment in your community other than, I know some Black people. So, but in short, that's the example I'll give. Stop sharing.
That was beautiful. I don't know. It's just, again, connecting back to that emotional sort of factor in all of this. Like, it's to connect with Essex family, to sort of reconstruct his archive, to present it in a loving way. Like, this is the core of what we're doing. It's not just about, as Zakiya said earlier, just keeping things, having things being kept, but like tending to them, presenting them in a loving way, like really expressing, you know, it's to the spirit of those who are no longer with us, especially that we care, we still care, and we honor you, and we appreciate what you've left, and we're grateful for your life and your work. And yeah. I guess I will share my screen and briefly sort of answer the question while I walk through some of this material. I'll do it very briefly. Can everyone see that? Is that showing up? Okay, so this is the Sall collection. And this is just sort of a basic deck that I've put together just for me to have, but also if people were interested in knowing more about it, I would sort of send them this document. But in short, the Sall collection is a small but growing collection of vernacular photography and rare printed matter. I won't read the whole thing, but it's essentially a collection that privileges vernacular photography, including studio photography, printed matter such as film posters, old journals, old newspapers, specifically coming from Africa. I have a bit from the diaspora, but really right now, because the collection is so young, I'm just focusing on continental African material. I started in 2018. Again, just from observing the fact that every time I tried to trace the source of an image or a film that I was teaching or interested in, it was always in some sort of like cold repository, what I perceived to be a cold repository, but also just my personal frustrations with the politics of the art world and how especially contemporary African photography, like studio photography has become super popular in recent years, even though it sort of emerged in the art world in the mid 1990s, and just sort of the messiness that surrounds this material in the context of gallery spaces, museum spaces, art market prices, etc. So I wanted to sort of create a home for some of the images and sort of buy back the archive and house it in a Black-owned home, so to speak. So these are examples of some portraits. Right off the back, I can tell you some of these are coming from Ghana. This is from Cameroon and Ghana. I have portraits from Mali, from Senegal. And sorry if I'm going through this very quickly, but it's just to sort of give you a snapshot of what the Sall collection is about. Mozambique. These are actually some examples from the diaspora. This is a studio in, I believe, Marseille, France, of African immigrants, a studio where African immigrants and other immigrants in the Marseille area would come and have their photos taken. And then some of the printed matter and some of the old journals and magazines coming from all over the continent. And so care shows up in my work by just, again, acknowledging the importance of creating a safe home and tending to these artifacts, and knowing that, in doing this work, I have to remain a student and have to remain sort of in this humble space of like honoring the legacies of people in this material, but also knowing that there's so much more to learn about not only the material, the people who are involved, but just the archival practices. Yeah, sorry, Zakiya, can you remind me of the question? I think I sort of like went off, like I was thinking about so many things. What's the question again?
No, it was really just, how does care show up? You just answered the question. I just wanted to see all the things in the Sall collection. That's all. I wanted the people to see.
And also, care shows up in just understanding that there's a slowness to this work as well. Like this is a slowly developing, at least for my collection personally, this is a slowly developing thing, and that I want it to be a lifelong thing. And so I'm not rushing to sort of just acquire, buy. I'm buying and acquiring with intention. I'm taking my time organizing, trying to set up a proper database for it, trying to just like also connect with people who may be in the photographs. I mean, there are some instances where I've posted things, not from my collection, but in general on Sunu Journal's Instagram, where people would be like, oh, that's my aunt, or that's my grandmother. And so just sort of like, just making connections with descendants from people who, sitters and subjects who may be part of or may be included in the photograph, and having conversations with them. And I'm working on a separate project now where I'm working with families and personal states of some more well-known photographers, and connecting with them on a deeper level, understanding the histories behind some of the work and certain personal stories. Like care really shows up in sort of like taking my time, understanding this is a work that involves a level of slowness and intentionally listening. And I think I'm always reminded of Tina Campt, who talks a lot about the haptic nature of images. And so I think about that too, like listening to the images, like how do I connect with images in a way that's not just me looking at them and me holding them, but just sort of like, again, to Zakiya's point, tending to them, holding them, not just keeping them, but sort of using, engaging all of my senses, connecting to people who may be related to people in the photographs or related to the material in some way. So it's really a holistic, sort of comprehensive approach, as opposed to I'm just going to get this photo, or I'm just going to buy this poster, or I'm just going to buy this magazine. But really sort of like I've read like almost every single page and in these magazines, and just to sort of get an understanding of what I'm holding, what I'm tending to. I want to like intimately know the material inside and out. So yeah, just slowness, listening, understanding, and just having a sense of gratitude. I know it sort of sounds cliche, but it's really like, it's deep work, it's emotional work. And this is our people. Like, how do we not really have an emotional attachment, and how do we not care for it deeply? Sorry, that's the end of it. But yeah.
Yes. I mean, you are like speaking to my soul, and like and you called it. I was looking at the images and the things that you collect and the way that you're talking about them. And I was like, oh my gosh, this just reminds me so much of Tina Campt's work and on vernacular photography. And you know, the way that she talks about like the work resonating.
Right.
And that led me to like sort of looking up like nerdy stuff, the origin of the word resonate, and like how it's like this reverberation, like it meets you and it just like, you know, it stays with you, it reverberates throughout your body. And I was just like, yes, that is what I feel when I do this work. Like I want to know it. And, you know, in doing this work professionally, there's often like this tendency to want it to get done quickly, and you need to just, you know, because the goal is access, you know, for other people and not just the archivist who like wants to care for it. But I think there is a beauty in that slow work. And it's something I touched on briefly in a conversation I had with the colleague from Schaumburg, Megan Williams, on archiving with care. And like this slowness to it is what creates, you know, better access when it is made accessible, because you've taken your time with it, you've cared for it. And when people see the collection, they get that too. You know, and when there's a description that like you read the description and you're just like, okay, like I feel like I know this person, and now I can like really dig in and like read the materials in the collection. But that comes from this tending from the archivist side. And so I'm so glad you touched on, you know, like this beauty of this slow work and it being a lifelong commitment and not just like a project, you know. A lot of this professional work is like project based, and it's like some of these things are long term. They're commitments, you know. You touch back in with the people that you've worked with. You work with their collections and their materials. That's like, we know each other. We family now. Like how are you doing? Like the materials may be doing what they're doing, but like, are you okay? Are you well? Are you eating? You know, that's part of the work too, because, you know, as we talked about, it's the people behind the papers and behind the photos that we're talking about here. And so I think in speaking about the people, and we've been talking about care in our work, and like just all that involves and what that looks like. But how do you care for yourselves in doing this work? Especially in the face of, you know, when we do encounter images that are like not contextualized and they are in these cold spaces, or Stephen, you mentioned like having to advocate for the preservation of certain collections because people don't see them as valuable. They don't value that community and their histories. And so how do you all care for yourself in light of that and in general? Just like, how y'all stay so moisturized? Because I see you
Amy,
shining.
that's Amy. So I'll take a stab at that. I was thinking about what you said about the slow work, Amy, which really is earlier on. I forgot what you said, but it made me write down the flow. Archiving will find the tempo and slow it down and say, hey, hold on for a second. We need to put this many flyers aside for the archive, right? It slows it down, right? But it will find its way no matter what we're producing, right? And then I thought the slow nature of it is really counterintuitive in an environment where, as you said, Zakiya, a lot of these project-based things are to get in, process the collection, and get out. And I was in the middle of coming to the profession where Antique Roadshow was just popping off. So it was a matter of how much is this again? How much can I give for this? And it was like, hold on for a second, your kids might want that photograph, or you think about this for a second. But it felt like I was moving into a culture that was trying to maintain that slowness and that ethic of care. And at the same time, they were being told you need to produce or perish. And it was like, we're a library. What? We're supposed to be just have the things we need to do to preserve the culture, but you understand that culture, everything is for sale to a large degree. I think in this environment, taking care of myself means that on the one hand, I'm helping to take care of others and what they're doing. So a lot of work that I do is pro bono because it's for the folk, and that's the price you pay. Something else Walker said, the price you pay on earth is to take care of other people, or something to that nature. I don't have it verbatim. And the second part of taking care of myself is, again, just knowing my story. So I have a collection of materials here that relate to not just my biographical materials and my writing and my publishing company, but also my genealogical records. And they mean the most to me. So if there were fire, I know exactly where to get them and they get out. And I'm in the process of digitizing them and sending them out to family members so that they have them as well. That care, that's how that care is expressed. And also, I take breaks a lot. I try to take as many breaks. As busy as I am typically, I like to take a lot of breaks and just breathe. So, yeah.
I'm going to second that, Stephen. Breaks are extremely, extremely important. Extremely important. And, when I think about how I care for myself in relation to this archival work, I think I'm going to explain it more in the context of my work with Sunu Journal, specifically the Instagram. I'd been working that Instagram since 2015 consistently, posting. At one point, it was multiple times a day. Then I sort of scaled it back a bit. So it was like several times a week. But I mean, it's also the Sunu Journal community. It really is a community. I mean, there are people who have been supporting for years. They feel like family, and I really tend to this notion of like it is a Pan-African community. We're a Pan-African platform. So every time there's an Independence Day, I will acknowledge an Independence Day, or I just ensure to just keep the community fed and nourished. But that was coming at a cost. Doing that consistently since 2015. It wasn't until last summer where I sort of announced, like, Sunu Journal is going on a break, because people think it's like this big organization. It's really just me. And it's been me for years. I'm proud that the work comes off as something larger, that people assume that I have like an army of people behind me, but it's really just me, my research, my curation, my, editing, with regards to the material on the website. But I had to say, we're taking a break. And that break was only supposed to be 2 weeks, and it's almost a year. But I acknowledge the fact that, what I've created is in many ways an archive itself. So there's more than enough material for people to revisit and engage with. There are links to films, there are links to resources. So the stuff is there, but I had to really set a boundary between myself. And it sounds, you know, it even sounds mean when I say it, but myself in the community, just because I needed to tend to myself in order to come back and continue that work. Because, you know, archival work, as we've reiterated and stated all throughout our beautiful conversation, it is not just us. We're dealing with the histories and legacy. We're dealing with other people. We're tending to the lives of people who have come before us and presenting that to people now with the thoughts of people in the future in mind. And so it's keeping a lot of people in mind. And, you know, you're sort of pouring out of your own cup and you realize like, I should refill this cup so that I can continue the work. And so I am definitely for taking breaks. And with regard to my collection, because it's slow work, as we were talking about, it doesn't feel like anything that is draining me. So I don't, you know, I feel fed and nourished as I'm doing it at my own pace. But I really felt the need to sort of reevaluate my pace when it came to SUNY Journal's Instagram and the social media side, because that felt more immediate. That felt more like I have to deliver it to the folks. I need to give them the information. I need to give them this material so that they remain fed. But I'm also like, they can be full for a while. They can, you know, sort of let this digest, even if it is almost a year, because there's so much for them to revisit. I love revisiting archives. I love going back and, you know, seeing things that I've seen before, because I'm coming to it with a different perspective, with fresh eyes. So I'm hoping that the SUNY Journal community is doing that and remaining engaged in that way. But I have become very comfortable saying like, listen, I kind of have to rest, but also understand that as much as I appreciate and love this archival work, that's not my identity. That's not all of me. So there are other parts of me that I need to tend to. There are other, you know, kinds of work and projects that I'm engaged in that also require my attention and my energy. And so, you know, in order for me to keep everything in balance and in play, you got to rest. And just, you know, just for we deserve it. You know, we deserve rest. You know, we've mentioned capitalism a few times, and it is a very capitalistic idea to just keep going, and not taking a break and not stopping to just sort of breathe, as Stephen was saying. And so we owe that to ourselves, and we owe that to the community that we're serving and tending to. In order to continue this building and this work, we have to take care of ourselves. I mean, I don't want to preach and go on. I do feel like we've entered a zeitgeist where Black folks especially are understanding the importance of rest. And I'm super grateful for people like the NAP ministry, who are like sort of like one of the champions of and spearheading this beautiful movement. And it's just, you know, understanding that is a birthright. Rest and taking care of ourselves is our birthright, and that it's not counterintuitive. It makes complete sense to stop in order to keep going. You know, that's what I'm leaning into these days. And I'm super grateful for people who are, you know, making it sink into the collective consciousness that rest and taking a break is actually part of the work in many ways and necessary for the work to continue.
Yes, I love that. I mean, I love that just the way that you all are. I'm glad that you are taking rest and breaks. Love that for us. And just that you all affirm the fact that like the rest and the breaks are a part of the work, because, you know, the work can't get done if you're not here to do it because you're burned out or, you know, otherwise unable to do it. And so, you know, the care work extends all the way around, you know, for yourself and for the things that sustain you. And then also the work, which also feeds you back. And like, it's just a, you know, mutual, like feeding, nourishing all around. And so that is just, I mean, incredibly important and keeps us going. And I know, like for me, I've released myself from working in institutions and doing this work and finding my way through doing the work collaboratively with the people that feed me on a regular basis. And so like the people that I do recognize in the audience, I got a project going on with everybody because I love I love my people so deeply, and you know, I don't believe in doing the work alone. You know, like that exhausts me. It doesn't give me any particular like credit or any, you know, I don't feel good when it's like I did this by myself. Like that don't feel good. And it's like, well, then why did I do it by myself? Like why didn't I ask for help? Or why didn't other people ask me if I needed help? And so I mean, I mean, I said it at the beginning, like being collective and doing work together is just it just means so much to me. And like once I know you, like, look, Amy, what we doing? Like me and like Steven and I have some projects. So like Amy, we doing something now. You know, I know Kristen from grad school, and now you know I'm here doing this, and so I mean I mean it. Like, what's up? And so I mean that's just like how I care for myself. In addition to um, buying all my comfort items. I just got like a 1-inch yoga mat today, and I like 1 inch thick, and it's just like, amen for the joints. The joints celebrate.
The joints, it makes a difference.
Makes a difference. I like laid on it for like 30 minutes, was just like, oh, wow, who knew? We were taking it back to like the little mats we had in kindergarten. It was like literally it felt like that. I was like, wow, about to have the best nap ever on this yoga mat. But you know, so we are approaching the end, and so before we go to Q&A, I just wanted to ask you all, as we've talked about capitalism and we've talked about like sort of this urge to like keep going, I think that we, in many ways, are in a unique space to be able to work with the things that we care about, and not everyone is in the space to do that for a variety of reasons. And so, I just wanted to ask you if you all have any recommendations for people who are looking to sort of merge their care with their work and their labor, or any, you know, thoughts about your own experiences that speak to that, for folks looking to sort of do more of this care work that isn't exhausting, that's filling, and all of that.
I'm reminded of something that Stephen said earlier in our conversation, which was, you know, the archives found him. And so I think for my advice would sort of be like, don't try to force the path or try to force the way to creating that particular work and trying to make sure you have all the right components and etc. But like, just allow yourself to let that come to you in many ways. I mean, I don't really have an eloquent way of saying it, because, you know, when I think about how I came to the work, like there was no sort of intention to start a collection. There was no sort of intention to archive it. And like Stephen, it sort of came to me. And so I think I would just say, lean into your interests deeply with intention, enjoy it, and the pieces will sort of assemble themselves. Like things will just start to fall into place. You'll be led to, you know, sort of sketching out or constructing the kind of work you want to do with the intention and the care that you want to include in a way that's just sort of seamless and beautiful and harmonious. I mean, I think from all three of our practices, I think that's something that we all have in common, that, you know, even though you guys are formally trained, it started, you know, like Zakiya, that notebook with your, maybe that's not necessarily the starting point, but like I'm thinking about the notebook with the songs, you know, just writing things down. Like you start to think like, you know, my work is sort of a reflection of pieces from my past. And so it became this thing that in many ways is already part of me, but also came to me. I don't know. It's just, I think this work comes about in a very fluid way. And so I guess my advice would just be to be open to the possibilities whilst enjoying what it is that you're doing now, and just sort of allowing things to come to you in a very natural way. And then once you arrive at that work, once you realize what it is that you want to do, just lean deeper into that, and always keep, you know, an ethical practice and, you know, just an ethic of care at the forefront with everything you do, and love really at the bottom of everything. It's like it is a larger idea of love that sort of anchors all of this. I don't know. There's no succinct way for me to offer advice, but yeah, because it's like, this is not like succinct stuff. Like, this is like deep healing, like beautiful emotional stuff. So there's no way to sort of like give a formulaic answer, but yeah.
That's right. There's no formula. I love how you said when you were thinking about it'll come to you, it'll flow to you. I think that part of that flow is really investing in yourself. Really investing in yourself, not in some sort of selfish, individualistic, I'm the only kind of person that ever did this in the universe kind of way, because you're always in context. Your work is always in context. Your life is always in context. And so connecting with yourself, I firmly believe that if you connect with yourself on a really fundamental loving level, you're a more loving person, you're a more acceptable person. And it might open up those gateways for those kinds of things. To something may have been knocking on your door for a minute. I love when Zakiya said, oh, that's what I've been doing all along. You learn the word archive and boom, you realize that you were collecting things, you were organizing things. And I love that. And I like what you're saying, Amy, about not forcing it as well. Even though the culture is constantly telling you, you need to be this, you need to be a millionaire by your 18 and have a shoe deal and an athlete and a perfect. No, you've got all your life. And that's all you have, is all your life. That's it, you know? And so just try to weed out a lot of the noise that's trying to keep you from knowing yourself, a lot of the blather. So I'm anti-guru, so don't follow anybody either, follow yourself.
Yes. All right. And so with that, thank you both. And we're gonna go ahead and transition into Q&A. If folks have anything, make sure you drop it in the chat, or in the Q&A. Said it wrong again. But it's just been so amazing to be in conversation with the two of you. And you know, I just love, you know, just the ways that this work flows and kind of moves through us. Similarly, because that love and ethic of care is at the forefront, and you just see it emanating all up and through each other and in the way we speak about it and to each other. And so this has just been such a pleasure.
It's been a beautiful and affirming and just, I don't know, beautiful conversation. I'm really happy to have been a part of it.
Yes.
And it also encourages me to like keep the work going, because I know it's a beautiful mission that we're all on in our own ways. You know.
We do have I think a Q&A, or have a Q or an A or just a comment.
Yes. We have from Peter. Thank you for your time and an incredible conversation. Thank you for coming, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, this is Nadia. I'm just going to jump in with my question on the mic really quickly. Do you have any advice for, someone like me? My mom has tons and tons of these pictures that she's kind of kept in the best way that she could. Some are, you know, damaged, but some are the only pictures I've ever seen of my grandparents. And like knowing how we could preserve these to the best of our ability while they're in our hands would be really great to know. I also take a lot of pictures of those pictures, and I should probably get better about organizing those things. So if you have any advice for that as well.
Like the trained archivists. Because I'm like still learning. I'm like, even with like, this is also something that I think a lot about too. Like, am I doing this right? Do I have the right material? I don't know.
I think about the analog photos and keeping them flat. So, and keeping them in, you don't even have to get acid-free photos. You could just use regular manila photos, but just to make sure that they're flat. One of the part of taking care of them, the preservation part, it's also the identification part. So if there are people who can identify these people in the photograph, some of which you know and some you may not know, it'd be a good time to do the digitalization thing where you're taking pictures and sharing them with people and go, do you know who this is? And just getting some metadata about that for the future, because that's a part of the care practice as well. And then I'll pass it over to Zakiya and the digitalization, digital archives.
Yes. So, yeah, to Stephen's point, making sure to identify these things and that, you know, exists both in the analog of whether you want to create an inventory list and, you know, have them organized in a way that you can, you know, go to the list and say, this photo is this and these people. But the same practice carries over to digitizing. You know, if you decide to digitize by taking a photo of, you know, with your phone or digitizing with like a flatbed scanner, either is fine. It's, you know, if the quality is not a like concern at the moment, which for many of us is like, I just want to be able to see grandma's face, you know, like everything else could be, there could be a little like blur in the corner, whatever. Let me see grandma one more time, you know? So as long as you can see the people and like all of that is good to go, you know, organizing it on your computer as well and being sure to have some of that metadata in the file names and kind of having a consistent file naming. So if you like have a, you know, if you want to do event space or people base, you know, these are all photos of grandma, but, you know, or events like this is Tony's wedding. And then inside the Tony's wedding photo, you have Tony's wedding underscore mom and dad underscore April 15th, 1963. And then that way, when someone else comes across it, they're able to know exactly what's there, or even you know, you're able to get back to it when you want to recall that particular thing. So having sort of a filing structure and a naming structure, and also backing your computer up. I have a reminder on my phone to back up my computer every 2 weeks. I have 2 hard drives in this drawer that's like right here. And so I will every 2 weeks pull it out, plug it in. It does its own thing. I do whatever I'm doing that day, let the computer back it up, and then I put it back in the drawer.
Nice.
And it's like, you know, having multiple copies. So, you know, maybe having that one hard drive here and leaving another hard drive, you know, at your mom's house or at, you know, a trusted person's house where you can access it and, you know you can get it back. And that way, if something happens with the one at your house or something happens with your computer, you're still able to access those things. And so just always thinking about having multiple copies and having identification, because it's still important to have them because you can see them, but it's also helpful when people know who people are and where they're at and what, you know, why were they wearing this? And that's something that, you know, with my mom, I'm like, who is that? And she's like, I don't know who baby that is. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about who's like where. Okay, we're in grandma's living room. Right. This person is there. They're wearing this. Let's do some like context clues. And she's like, oh, that must be Stacy. And I'm like, okay, it's Stacy. Cool, got it. And then she's like, no. And so like, you know, just it's part of that slow work too, right? Of having that conversation and like asking. And back to my collective point, it doesn't have to just be you, you know, invite all the cousins over, all the siblings over, somebody cook or buy food or whatever, everybody bring a plate. You're going to eat, you're going to digitize, you're going to eat, you're going to describe, eat, and like or eat and do an oral history where you just like flip through the pictures and you ask who's who and you talk about it. All of that is the work. And it feels good when you can do it and it's not in a cold space and it's not, you know, you can eat like we like to eat, you know, so Sunday dinner. It's like, okay, we're gonna also go through before everybody leaves. We're gonna go through these photos. So yeah.
I like it that you said an occasion, because part of the care work is about occasion. You know, backing up your phone, making sure you back up your phone, finding creative ways to get that information, doing the oral histories, doing the family dinners, and somebody's cooking. Every Sunday I do something archival, genealogy, personal archives, oral history, whatever. So I do something. It's not all day. Sometimes it's only an hour, but that's my day. It's Archive Sunday. So it could be an occasion where you guys know that at that next family reunion, some of y'all gonna be sitting at a table writing this stuff down and calling people over to talk to them. Stuff like that. Just find creative ways. There's so many ways to do it. So many ways.
I love that in both of your responses, there's like an element of ritual involved. Like every 2 weeks, I gotta back up my computer. Like every Sunday, I'm doing something archival. So like injecting this notion of ritual again is also bringing us back to the notion of care and intention and emotion, like making something ritualistic and just like everything that comes along with it. Like it's really, really beautiful. I mean, I've taken all the notes. I'm gonna back up my computer. I'm gonna attend to my databases and, you know, just get things in order.
Well, I heard your ritual too. You know, you were talking about always getting that metadata and doing your research and making sure it's accessible. That's a ritual too.
You're
so,
right.
I mean, I think that's how we have the collections that we have, right? Like, I think about Arturo Schomburg, and like whenever he traveled somewhere and he was trying to buy something, you know, no matter where I'm going in the world, I'm like I'm on Twitter all the time. Anybody seen that Denzel meme? He's like, I'm leaving here with something. And it's like literally everywhere I go, I'm like, ooh, a flyer. Like, you know, I have like a flyer right here. I'm like, ooh, you know, like I'm taking this back. And then it's going to go in like my ephemera folder. Or if I participated, it's going to go in the like, you know, ephemera from something I participated in folder, you know, or box. And so those rituals is how we ended up here, and how we have these collections, you know, that organizers have collected, and like how we know what time the event was, or like how they planned this protest, because somebody had a ritual of stuffing flyers in their pockets on their way home, you know, running from, you know, trying to run from violence or like police, but like stuffing a flyer in their pocket. That's also me. And so the rituals is how we sustain this work, and how we, you know, keep having these materials and memories. So I love that you pointed that out.
Yes. Hello, Kristen. It's me, Kristen. I just wanted to, you know, wrap us up and say that I'm so incredibly grateful for you, Zakiya and Amy and Stephen. Zakiya, you know, as classmates and as someone who is returning to the library world myself from galleries, I'm just so grateful to have been able to also participate in listening to you all and your wisdom and the way you center care and intention in the work you do. And I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to participate in this conversation. As Zakiya said, we're going to be in contact, and I look forward to being able to learn more about the work that you're doing with your archives, the Nomadic Project, the Nomadic Archivist Project, and Amy, your Sunu Journal and the Amy Sall collection. I just wanted to share that this program was in conjunction with an exhibition at Bard Graduate Center that's currently on view called Conserving Active Matter. Those who are still here, you can use the code CARE for complimentary admission. The link will be shared in the chat, so please visit the exhibition. And the next program that we will be having in conjunction with the exhibition that I've also guest organized is called Plants as Artifacts, Living Practices of Sugar and Coffee. And it is organized by an amazing artist collective and education platform called Urban Cura, based in New York, that is thinking about the different ways that these plants have kind of been commodified and refined, and helping us seek to create access to ancestral and plant wisdom with plants as active matter. So that link is also in the chat. And just thank you all so much again for participating. I hope everyone is able to have a beautiful evening. The sun is still out a little bit. And I look forward to connecting with you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much
you
for having me.
Okay.